Okay. Well, I was asked specifically by Kelly Jackson to discuss 10 great trees for your landscape, and the presentation doesn't do that. So very quickly, 10 great trees. We usually consider red maple, which is many cultivars. If you look in Mike Durr's book, you'll find that there's pages and pages and pages committed to his to the maples group. Also oaks, red oaks are very popular. And I'm going to mention one oak in this presentation, but some of my favorites are willow oak for its small leaves and its large size and shading. Then we have a pin oak, which many people consider to be a great tree, but it's a little touchy about pH. You might have to make some adjustments to keep it green and live and growing. Then we can move into our typical smaller trees, our ornamental trees like dogwoods. They are surprisingly versatile. You move into a red bud. A red bud to me can grow on almost the parking lot. And you'll frequently see it in Kentucky as the first invader of riprap on highway roadsides. And if you haven't traveled in West Kentucky around a lot of the coal mining areas, redbud is very densely populated in the central city, Muhlenberg County area, in spite of the fact that it's a native tree throughout the whole state of Kentucky. So there are many that we can all think of immediately as a great tree to put into our landscape, but they all come with some sort of baggage. Right now we have dogwoods with powdery mildew. Red buds, they don't always last as long as we'd like them to. Red oaks, the oak family in general is very susceptible to bacterial leaf scorch in Kentucky anytime they're seriously stressed by construction activities. And then we also have in the maples, we have flathead apple tree borers and other problems. So there's no real perfect trees. So I'm going to go through some slides on some of the things we deal with and some of the plants that I think we should consider in addition to those that we normally would find at the average garden center or retail nursery or even some of our discount places or potentially even Lowe's and Home Depot. So I will start. I have a website. Well, the Nursery Landscape Group has a website specifically to UKREC, the one that's on the slide, Nursery Crop Extension, and UKREC Nursery Crops is there. So you can log into that. I write up about the books and plants and the Theodore Klein Plant Award. Oh, speaking of Theodore Klein Plant Award, that's been going on since 1995 and it's now 2020. So there's been an enormous number of plant selections of good quality plants, all the way from perennials up into large trees selected to win that award on an annual basis. So that's always a good place. And you can type in Theodore Klein Plant Award in Google and get to it. I forgot to start my clock and I'm already 4 minutes in. Okay, so you keep track of me because I don't want to go too long. Okay, now I live in Western Kentucky near the lakes and I see this every day. Right now, property is selling at a fairly significant clip around the lakes. And you see this and you say, you can't grow plants there, but they're going to put plants there. The dogwood that they put there is gone, but I have seen dogwood tolerate these conditions. The reason it's gone is because nobody bothered to water it or keep the grass away from it, and the weed eaters took the bark off the base. So there's always a different reason for why a plant might not survive. But when you're dealing with something along these lines, you can automatically see an issue. First off, you've got the gravel here. Let me get rid of this thing here. Okay, so you've got the gravel, which bleeds in high pH. You've got, if you'll notice that white pipe back there, that gravel is a French drain for the drains off the roof. which could be problematic. And you know, it's just deplorable. I mean, I don't know what to say about it, but they did cover that with soil. This happened at the experiment station where I work. If you look at plans specifically for how things are supposed to be done, this might have seemed rational to the contractor, but certainly not to me or to the person who's supposed to put in the landscape plans. But to make matters worse, I went out and said, hey, you got to get that gravel out of there. He said, no, that's the way it's supposed to be. That's the way I'm doing it. So he brought in this big long arm backhoe and spread out the soil. Then I came in the next morning and they had actually compacted it with a highway compactor to make sure it was smooth and flat and attractive. Of course, you can't grow plants in that. And ultimately, we had to have all of that dug out, all the gravel and all of the soil, and have it reset. But fortunately, the landscape contractor took over that responsibility in dealing with the person who was actually building our building. So that was a relief to us, because as the person purchasing the landscape, you don't want to get into a battle with the person that's building the building. So in any case, it went well, and thankfully the landscape contractor was able to make the adjustments and have it repaired and have it dug out and give us a quality type of place to grow plants. This, on the other hand, was another site near where I live, where people just spread things around. I don't know what they used, some sort of a rototiller or something. And then the sod was actually laid on top of this. I mean, the rocks were just pushed over. And now the sod, in spite of any kind of irrigation or anything else, is doing very poorly, as would be expected. And it's patchy. So the places where this piece of metal might be, it's dead. Other places it's alive and growing well because there's low spots where the water is. All right, another problem we had during the construction was them using equipment to run around the landscape, which was fenced off. So ultimately, this area right here had to be fenced, and it was, and the contractor was very agreeable to it. So there was not too much problem there once we got into it. Okay. Okay, and I wanted to bring up this book. Many of you may have seen it or not as yet, but this is the tree book. Most people know Michael Durr for his Manual of Woody Landscape Plants and a lot of his other books, but this particular book is specific to selections for landscapes, streetscapes, and gardens. And so with each plant, he and Keith Warren was the breeder for J. Frank Schmidt in Oregon. With each plant, they describe its potential use. It's big, so you want to use it in a park. It's small and narrow, so it will be used as a street tree. And the descriptions are outstanding. And I was waiting for a new edition for the manual, which I don't know will ever come. But this tree book is most excellent. It's very helpful if you're looking through, and it has a lot of good pictures to tell you about what the plant is that you may be looking for, or a plant that you've decided on, and whether it'll actually fit what your expectation is. Maybe your local library can get it. I put this book in at the last minute. You can see I'm holding it up took a picture with my cell phone. But Doug Tallamy and many of his cohorts have written this book, and it's outstanding. It's about developing a landscape that will add to our overall conservation of bird species, insect species, and just in general to tie things together as habitat is lost due to farming activities and urban sprawl and housing subdivisions and that sort of thing. And it describes plants, it describes birds, it describes what birds eat. It shows the bird on the picture there with a worm. It gives you an idea of how to develop a habitat for the birds to find the insects to eat, so that you don't have to feed them with a bird feeder. Everything is basically there. And I wanted to include, for those who may not be aware of these things, the Nursery and Landscape Insider is a newsletter by Matthew Chappell that is promoted and published for free by Grower Talks. It is a commercial enterprise, but it might be something that people would enjoy. Also recently, very recently, like 2 days ago, the Horticulture Research Institute developed a standard set of terms for describing plant disease resistance in plants. And there's been a problem forever. Is resistance the same as tolerance? Is tolerance the same as immunity? There's all these terms that we use to describe plants. And especially when you're applying for a patent, when we're trying to make improvements to plants, you need some way to be sure that what you're describing is factual. If they're resistant to powdery mildew, well, that doesn't mean they won't get it. It just means they won't be they're less susceptible to it, and they may not show the symptoms. So they're pretty cool. I'm proud about that. These are the plants we're going to talk about, so I'm going to move right on, but I wanted to be sure that you had the list. Also some background use. I looked up Ohio Buckeye, which we're going to talk about, and found it, as you'd expect, at UK, which I was pleased to find a publication at UK. I believe it's by Bob Geneve. Then Mike Durr and Keith Warren, I mentioned about the tree book, and then Mike Durr, the Manual Woody Landscape Plants. So if you want to actually propagate plants and know more data, no pictures, but more data about a particular plant, Mike Durr's Manual of Woody Landscape Plants is 6th edition, is very useful, even though it's 2009. And you can probably buy it used because it is a textbook used in classes. I wanted to bring this up because we were talking earlier about the potential problems that we have with specific plants. I overloaded the landscape and the street here at the University of Kentucky with red oaks, willow oaks, and other Shumard oaks, and ended up with bacterial leaf spot on some of the old trees that I planted back in 1980 next to the road, where the utility company come through and pruned them, and they'd struggled a little bit to get established. They developed bacterial leaf scorch. Well, now the plants all have their roots tied together. So plants in the landscape have stretched out and reached out into a water basin, and so have the street plants, and they have transmitted this disease to one another via root grass. So we have a couple of plants that look really bad, and if we just remove those, that won't remove the problem. So ultimately, I'm looking for plants that I can put back into those locations that are not susceptible to bacterial leaf scorch. And Dr. John Hartman wrote a book, or a UK publication back in 2007. And I'm getting ready to send this table out to plant diagnosticians all over the Southeast and some north of us to ask if this is truly, literally can be accepted nowadays, because these are strictly observations of tree species that haven't been affected by bacterial leaf scorch. And there's a lot of good plants in here. Of course, ash we're done with because it has bacteria, emerald ash borer. But black gum, yellow buckeye, European beech, I don't know about catalpa, but Kentucky coffee tree, there's a whole bunch of elms, even hackberry. A lot of people don't like it for breakage, but all the hickories, katsura, a lot of good plants in this list that are supposedly have not been affected by bacterial leaf scorch. So I want to go ahead and check on that and see if that's the case. So this is the first of the plants. I love this plant. I got this seed from the Spring Grove Cemetery in Cincinnati. And Dr. Durr thinks this is the best large Buckeye horse chestnut for large areas that can be seen, and I love it. Unfortunately, as with all plants, this one is very resistant to leaf spots and leaf diseases, but it produces an enormous amount of fruit, and that drops on the ground, of course, and the lawn mowing guys don't like it. But it doesn't last long. Squirrels absolutely love the starch and eat the fruit pretty quickly. As a matter of fact, in the wild, you almost can't find the fruit. But here at our landscape, we don't have very many squirrels, and so it lasts quite a while and does drop on the ground. This is the bark in its youth. Now this tree, I collected the seed that I grew this tree from almost 25 years ago. But as it gets older, it loses this elephant skin looking look and it becomes more platy. And it's a great, great tree. I love it, yellow buckeye. This is the bloom. It's very yellow when you see it. And then it does attract different butterflies and insects when it's flowering and the stamens are out. So it's a good plant to add to the landscape. It is a large tree. But Susan Fox in Lyon County, the county extension agent for agriculture and natural resources, told me that most all the buckeyes in Western Kentucky were Ohio buckeyes. And I thought they were yellow buckeyes, but I'd never seen any fruit on the ones in the wild because it's almost impossible to beat the squirrels to it because they'll eat it green. So I said, okay, I'm going to check on this. So I found a couple plants in the wild, wild areas that have long been known to be wild, now near some creeks and things, and kept track of them. And sure enough, this is what yellow buckeye, and this same fruit type is the same kind you'll find on bottlebrush buckeye, and also, what's our other one? Oh, red buckeye. So I thought, okay, but this is the only one I was able to get my hands on because the plant, like I said, the squirrels will take it in the wild, but this spiky thing, that's Ohio buckeye. So what we have in West Kentucky is Ohio buckeye. Thank you, Susan, for asking the question, because otherwise I wouldn't have taken a look. I would have continued to say that our native in West Kentucky was yellow buckeye when it was not. So it seems like most of our yellow flowering buckeyes in Western Kentucky are Ohio buckeye. As a matter of fact, it's according to Ron Jones' book, it's not even a native in Kentucky. It's actually a native to Appalachia area down in Tennessee, right near the border. So he's assuming it's somewhere in Kentucky, but not here. This is another great plant, Caria illinoisensis. This particular one is a seedling from a plant called the bank, which actually was in a local community here in Princeton. It's a hardy pecan. It's a massive tree, so it's not something we want to just set out in the street. We need to have space for it. For those of you who visit us, this is in the southwest corner of the fenced area around our building. And it did survive the construction, and it's done very, very well. It has good foliage, and I really love this tree. I mean, it's special. There's what the fruit and the leaves look like. It's pretty good sized fruit. Used to pick it up and eat them. Now I think the squirrels and other animals seem to haul them off even while they're still green. They start shucking them right about now on hickories, pecans. They start already, even with the green skin on, start taking them. They are a compound leaf, and they normally do have this sickle looking bend to them. You see some that don't, but normally you'll find that they have this bend, which gives the indication that they are a pecan versus one of the hickories. And as I pointed out, it is a massive tree. This is one of my favorites. There's a story why it's my favorite. In 1994, my daughter graduated from UK and we went to Europe. And we traveled and we visited all of the gardens in the Loire Valley of France. And I got addicted to Cedar of Lebanon. And unfortunately, in looking a couple of days ago, I found I don't actually have a picture that shows what I love about them. They get flat topped here. They get very flat topped, and then these branches on the side grow up and they make a massive, like a living environment, like a home up here, like you see on some of the giant sequoias, where the top is spread out and it's almost a platform. And that's what I really, really enjoyed. The plant that we can grow here is the Cedrus Lebanii subspecies variety Stenocoma. And if you want an evergreen, we'll go ahead and address some evergreens. Cedrus Lebanii, Stenocoma, Abies normanii, and the Oriental spruce seem to be the ones that perform the best in Kentucky if you're looking for the top three. Because Cedrus Lebanii subspecies Stenocoma might be a little difficult to find, but it's an outstanding plant, and I call it, you know, precious. Of course, I can't dare say that out loud in front of my daughters, but it's okay. And this is what it looks like, and this is typical of all the Cedrus, Glauca, Atlantica, and all the others. This is the wing that carries the seed to the ground. The seed has already dropped out of this particular wing, and this is what the foliage looks like, and it is an evergreen. I wanted to make sure and make that point. This particular plant is our Kentucky coffee tree. Outstanding plant. It's described as soil tolerant, but that has not been my experience. These are planted behind our building in what I will call native soil. Of course, the building was put here because the soil wasn't that good to start with, but these were planted here in the front of the building where we had a lot of that nasty soil from the 1980 building construction. And I could never get them to grow in that soil. It was too wet, it was too heavy, it was too tight, very little aeration. And I got these two seedlings given to me, and I planted them in the back of the building in this soil, and they've done very well, but they were seedlings. So each one is slightly different. There is a new cultivar, not new, but new it seems to the industry, called Espresso, which is a male form. In other words, it doesn't have the seeds. Now, if you're into the seeds and you eat the inner material as a child and you want to have the seeds, that's fine. You can just get seedling types, and that's typically what's available. But if you want a plant that doesn't have the seed, doesn't drop trash on the ground, and is known for being quite quick to grow and to develop the mature form, Espresso is currently available in the industry, and it's fairly common. I put these in because we're always looking for evergreens, right? And we also want the Italianette. That's probably a mispronunciation. We want that Italian look of the Italian cypress. But that doesn't really grow here. So this is one called Taylor, which is a Virginiana, which is our native species of red cedar. You can go out into the wild in Kentucky, and because of all the seedlings of red cedar, you can select plants, and that's what's happened here. Someone decided, wow, that thing is really tight and it stays green in the winter. That's the key. Our American red cedars in Kentucky have a tendency to turn brown, so in the winter. So we want one that stays green over winter, and we want one that's upright to fit into lots of different environments. And so Taylor has done fairly well. The one on the left, your left, was the one that was planted from a container. The one on the right is the same plant about 3 years later. So it is a very vigorous grower. But remember that soil disruption around new construction. The plant has a very coarse root system, which has made it difficult for us to move, and that's probably the reason you don't see a lot of these garage door open. Why you don't see a lot of red cedar in our landscapes. But in any case, you can see where it's got some fence posts. Well, that's a fence post with like monofilament to hold that plant up because it started to go over. So the shallow soils that we encounter in these types of landscapes can cause a problem with your selections. And if it does, you do the best you can to accommodate it. There's not much you can do after you've planted that large a tree into that spot. So you just deal with it the best you can. In this case, they're supporting the plant until it can reestablish that coarse root system into the surface soil and have it be wide enough and far enough out from the tree to give it stability. This is another native eastern red cedar, which was selected by Mike Heyman, and it's called Greenpoint. It's available from Ashley Short at Highland Brook Nursery in, I'm not sure where he's at. It's down here near the Jefferson Monument, but Fairview area, that type of Guthrie. But he grows this. He's a wholesale nursery. You can't get it from him directly, but your local landscape contractor or someone like that might be able to get it. And this is an outstanding plant. I'm very impressed by it. It's vigorous growth. It does fairly well, and it seems to transplant fairly well. He grows it. The statement there is its coarse root system makes it difficult to transplant from B&B. But Ashley does a very good job and seems to have great success with it. The same token, if you can find it in a container grown smaller plant, that might be the way to go. And that's the way I went with it. So this past winter was brutal. I don't know how many of you grow Arborvitaes, but this is our part of our Arborvitae collection, and it took a hit. North Pole is one that's currently popular in the green garden centers and discount places, and it's an outstanding plant. It's one of the proven winners. Morgan, this little plant here, is normally yellow-green. I've never seen it that brown. DeGroot Spire is one of my favorites. It grows very upright. And here's Greenpoint, green, a small plant that I got as a container plant a year or two ago. So this is what they look like now, right now, and I'm very impressed. The only thing is I've accidentally allowed this North Pole to have 2 leaders, and I will cut one of them out, and it will look bad for a season. But I like a single leader, so I will cut one of those 2 out also. Here's Morgan. This is a beautiful small plant. It's the strangest plant. It only grows to be about 30 to 36 inches tall and about, maybe 2 feet wide. But I saw the plant planted alongside of a driveway, on both sides of a driveway, and it was wonderful, delightful look, without any pruning or any other activity. It's called Morgan. It's an Arborvitae. Okay, and here's Greenpoint, an excellent plant growing upright, but I wonder what, the deer don't eat junipers, so I don't know why it's got that hole in it. It might have stretched in growth with a little fertilizer when we first set it out. And this is a new one we got from Mike Yanni up at Johnson's Nursery in Wisconsin, and it's called Star Power, and he's very impressed with it also as an upright type of juniper that could be used instead of Arborvitaes. Okay, moving along. Resistant oak leaf scorch? I don't know, but I sure like it. This one's called Wildfire. In the spring, it will have these new growth will all be bright red, and it lasts for a month to a month and a half or longer, and it's very attractive in the spring. It's like it's in bloom from a distance. And then now, this is a picture I took last week. It's green with a little bit of new growth showing, a little bit of red showing on different places. I have 3 of these, and they're doing exceptionally well as an upright black gum. I have worried because I've seen some with the top broken out for some reason. I don't know if birds have broken off a branch or what's happened, so that's kind of disconcerting. But there are many, many black gums available now, and one of the best is Red Rage, which was selected again by Mike Heyman. The most popular right now for its fall color is one called Afterburner. And the one for the best summer foliage is Green Gable, which also happens to be a male and doesn't produce all the small fruit. But we're keeping Doug Tallamy's ideas in check and saying we should have fruit for the birds, right? Okay. So I'm in 30 minutes. I'm going to keep going if that's okay, and I apologize. I underestimated my talking on the non-plants. Okay, this is Mike Heyman. This is another plant, a Plantinus. And we've selected 3, Yarwood, Columbia, and Liberty, as 2009 Theodore Klein Plant Award winners. It has an exceptional white bark, and so I'm enamored by it. But at the same token, Yarrow, Columbia, and Liberty are excellent street trees. Excellent street trees. They're used all over Europe, and they limb them up to 13 feet in the nursery before they even take them out and put them on the street. Why? Because a semi-truck is 13 feet tall, that's why. So it's a very interesting plant. I happen to love this one. I finally got one. They're grafted. And then it has this foliage. This is the Sutnerii with the white bark. It has this variegated foliage. Outstanding. I never really noticed it until a year or 2 after I had the plant. I didn't know it did that. I thought it just had green foliage, just like all the others. And you can see the reason it's acerifolia is because it looks like maple. This is as they get older. This particular one is at a garden in Louisville, and kids started climbing it, and as you can expect, writing their names on it with pencils and pen knives and things like that. So they had to put the fence around it. My favorite plant is, well, not my favorite because I like them all, but Quercus alba, a white oak, is a massive plant, and if you have a massive park-like area like this, to put it, it's just stunning, stunning plant. Excellent foliage. Some have good fall color. Not all, but some. This is a smaller tree. It's about 40 feet tall near the lake. It actually grew up because there's a lot of white oak in this particular area. Probably a seedling from a squirrel or some other critter had buried in this drainage area, and it came up and grew. This is one that's fairly popular, and we picked this again in 2019 as a Theodore Klein Plant Award winner. It's called Kindred Spirit. It was named Natler after a young man who worked for Earl Cully, who found the plant and helped develop it and get it branded and trademarked and all the other. And this is beautiful foliage right now with the acorns. And of course, the acorns are good for animals and critters and feed, and they also are a way we can propagate it. I put this in just because I absolutely love this plant. So this is, a cherry. And I look at cherries as being short-lived, but this is very fragrant. It blooms exceptionally early in the season, and it smells wonderful. So Prunus mumi, any of the cultivars of Prunus mumi, if you go ahead and get one and plant it, put it someplace where if it doesn't make it over a long period of time, 10 to 15 years, you can replace it with a dogwood or a redbud or something else. But they're always, when I see them, I know them right away what they are. They're called Japanese apricot. It's just a wonderful plant. Okay, so we've got the golden larch, another plant that I just love. This is in Mike Heyman's yard, the particular one on the left. This is a small one at Bernheim, and this is the foliage. I mean, in the fall, it's just spectacular. Here's the small cones that will develop after they're pollinated. So it's a beautiful plant. Magnificent structure and form when it gets large, but as you can see, this wouldn't be a street tree either. And most places I've ever seen it in a large tree, this is an Arnold Arboretum, it's branched to the ground. Zelkova serrata was there to be the replacement for the loss of American elm. In Western Kentucky, we still have a lot of American elms, including here at the experiment station on our landscape. So we didn't necessarily go ahead and change them, but many people have planted Zelkova. I see it at Walmarts, parking lots, and all kinds of places being used as a replacement for an upright plant that can be limbed up and will grow limbed up on its own, so that you can have it be clear of trucks and cars. And at the same token, it's very tolerant of conditions and does quite well in most places. Zelkova serrata, its common name is Zelkova. And this is what the foliage looks like. It's very attractive, alternate And the bark, as it grows older, is also in that attractive form. Just quickly, a gift from Kathy Keeney and the Purchase Area Master Gardeners for speaking at Garden Grooves as a small 1-foot graft. This is Carpinus betulus Vienna Weeper. We might talk about Carpinus at another time, but we had to move it because I was told it was a dwarf. Well, it wasn't a dwarf. Carpinus get to be 20 to 50 feet tall, depending on which one you have. And this one gets to be 20 to 50 feet wide. So we had to move it out of the landscape. There's the new building. That picture was taken last week. So it's done very well. And we're very proud to have this specialty plant. Okay, so maybe next time we'll look over some of these plants, and I will say I apologize for running over fairly significantly, and we'll leave it at that. Thank you.